Welcome to the PFO channel. I'm Jim. In one of my earlier videos, I found and fixed an interference problem under the hood of this mini excavator that was preventing my idle speed from going as low as I thought it ought to go. The reason that's important is that at a higher engine speed, your motion when you're tracking forward or backward tends to be more jerky, and I wanted to smooth that out a little bit. It turns out, though, that that was only one of the issues preventing me from getting back down to a good idle speed. Let's go see what I found. You know, this throttle, even though I fixed that definite interference that was on there, I just don't like it. It's not taking full advantage of its idle setting. I still am not happy with the degree to which it is idling down when I pull the throttle all the way forward or push the throttle all the way forward. But it's just the goofy springs, and it gets to a point where everything just kind of, the springs are at rest, and it just isn't back where I think it ought to be. I think I am gonna go reach in there, and at the risk of something going weird on me, I think I'm gonna bend that tab to put a little bit more spring force, pulling that down to idle. I reserve the right to regret this. All right, this is wide open and this is idle. And when you let go of this, notice it just goes back to this point, but you can force it further, but there's nothing in the system to pull it further. And this spring right here, that one, if that was pulling a little harder, I think it would pull it back to idle. So you see this tab that's just bent upwards 90 degrees from the rest of this stamped steel plate here? I think if I were to bend that a little bit northwest, which is that way, for those of you with no knowledge as to the spatial orientation of my workshop, that would put more tension on that spring, and I think it would pull it back to idle a little better. Now, this is something that's best accomplished with the engine running, so you know how far you have actually affected it in the direction you hope to. But I wanted to explain it before I start the engine, because it's going to get kind of loud when I start the engine. And what I'll do is I'll just reach in there, and I'll rotate this counterclockwise and see how much the idle speed will come down on that. So I'm going to start it up and stop talking and start showing. All right, I tested that 3 times and it did the same thing each time. And what I was specifically doing is I was throttling it up and then back down as far as it goes towards idle. And then I was touching this here to see if, even though it will go a little further, pushing it further would not result in a lower engine speed. Before, what was happening is it was throttling down according to the cable, but then if I came out here and pushed it, it would go even slower by operating the manual lever there. That's the turtle rabbit. See the turtle rabbit? So what I did is I changed it. I noticed that this screw, right, probably didn't have a good angle on that, but see on the top of that mechanism, there's this nut right there, and that's what puts tension on this whole mechanism. And that looks to me, that's a nylon lined nut, so that's intended to hold a position. And so I thought, well, if I loosen that thing up a little bit, that will allow that system to move a little bit more freely. So I tested it 3 times. I put my lever to idle up on the control center, and then I went over here to my old manual rabbit and turtle and pushed it towards turtle and to see if it would slow it down even further, and it did not. So I think I finally got this governor set up so that it will allow the throttle lever to go back to idle. And the other thing I was doing when the engine was running and you couldn't hear me was this screw right here. That is the idle speed screw. It's not the idle mixture. And all that does is that bumps into the back side of this throttle lever when it comes back to idle. And I backed that out, which is counterclockwise, which gets that out of the way of the lever. And I noticed that it did idle down a little bit more while I was doing that. And then I backed it in to the point where it was just touching the lever, and any further turning clockwise would have made the idle speed up. So that was what I called the point of contact, where I ended up leaving it. So I think what I've got here is the lowest idle speed, which is obtainable within the degrees of freedom allowable by this particular system. And again, the reason I want a lower idle speed is because the erratic movement of the hydraulics is accentuated with higher engine speeds, because you have more flow and more pressure in your hydraulic system, and so the opening and closing of the control valves causes a greater burst of fluid movement, and that's where you get your jerky operation. It's like riding a mechanical bull there if you got your engine speed too high. All right, so I think that is fine-tuned to the extent possible. And one more time, I messed with that lever right there, that actually the piece of metal that was 90 degrees. I tipped it back, I don't know, 5 degrees or so to put additional tension on this spring, pulling the governor back towards idle. And then I loosened up this nut here a little bit to make this system move a little more freely. And then I backed the speed screw out with the lever and the governor set at idle. I backed the speed screw out until the speed was no longer dropping off as I turned it, and then I went back clockwise just until it was making contact to where further turns clockwise started raising the RPM. So that's my minimum. All right, if you're having that problem, give it a shot. That might help you. If you found this useful, go ahead and like and subscribe, and comment and share. That wouldn't hurt either. Thanks a lot for watching. PFO channel out.